The smoke of the shattered sept still clung to the air like a shroud of mourning when Margaery Tyrell drew her first steady breath of dawn. Hours earlier, wildfire had devoured stone and flesh alike, but she had not been among the doomed crowd. She owed her life to the faintest tremor. Something in the marble beneath her feet had whispered of doom, and that whisper had driven her from those gilded doors minutes before the green inferno bloomed. She did not dwell on the miracle. She sealed it away, a private covenant with the gods, and turned her thoughts to the realm that Cersei now claimed, through fire and coronation. Though her lungs had taken the reek of ash, her mind remained razor bright. The Reach had not yet knelt to the Lion Queen, and the Riverlands smoldered with quiet discontent. A crown won by annihilation rested upon treacherous ground. Steel alone could not rule such a realm, and Cersei Lannister possessed nothing else. Margaery, by contrast, wielded that subtler blade forged from smiles, songs, and whispered favors, the silk ribbon that bound lords faster than any chain. At sunrise she stood upon a terrace of the ruined manse that had sheltered her flight. From its height, she beheld King's Landing weeping black tears, where the sept once rose. Bells tolled in grief, yet every stroke echoed hollow. The small folk's faith lay buried beneath the green glass. That emptiness, Margaery knew, could be her unblooded army. She would clothe the wound in hope, and hope would become a spear aimed at the Iron Throne. Ser Loras had burned, but a dozen Tyrell knights yet rode at her back, each sworn to secrecy until her path was clear. Among them loomed Sir Brynden Hightower, cousin to the White Harbor branch, and a man whose piety matched his sword arm. It was he who knelt as the sun crept over the black water. "Your Grace," he murmured, though she wore no crown. "Word is spreading that you escaped the Queen's justice. When the city learns you live, the people will rejoice, yet the crown will hunt you." "The city must learn," she answered, "but not yet from gossip. A single tale in the wrong tongue could paint me a traitor. I must speak for myself before every eye in the capital. To do so you must stand before the Red Keep's gates," Sir Brynden said. "Not gates, steps." Her gaze drifted to the scorched horizon where the sept had stood. The Queen burned the voice of the gods. "I will stand upon the ashes of her sin and give the city a new testament." That very day she set quill to parchment, drafting letters meant to fly as swift as ravens' wings to every lord with a daughter in a gilded cage, every merchant whose coin had withered under Lannister tariffs, every common widow who cried for the faith's shattered promise of mercy. The ink wrote not of vengeance but of gardens yet to bloom, harvests free of war's tithe, temples rebuilt in white marble finer than any destroyed. Her words carried the perfume of spring into a kingdom starved of light. Within a sennight, Reachman ships anchored on the Blackwater under banners stitched with golden roses and the ancient hand of Garth Greenhand entwined. The Tyrell captains brought grain instead of siege works, scented soaps instead of pitch. The small folk cheered and crowded the quays for bread loaves shaped as blossoms, passing them hand to hand until even beggars tasted the Reach's bounty. While the city's bellies filled, Margaery moved unseen through Flea Bottom in a plain gray cloak. She spoke to herbalists who brewed pennyroyal, to scribes who inked ballads on scraps, to cobblers who mended boots for sparrows too poor to own shoes. For each, she left a seed, coins. Yes, but more potent were her promises. A garden plot behind a rebuilt sept, a guild charter unfettered by bribes, a festival of the mother to honor widows at harvest's end. Stories sprouted faster than weeds. They called her the Rose Reborn, the Maiden's Mercy, the Queen who walked barefoot among the hungry. When rumors reached the Red Keep, Cersei ordered her new gold cloaks to scour every alley, yet they found only petals scattered where Margaery had been. Petals and whispers have wings stronger than any raven. As the city stirred, Margaery's letters bore fruit in the heart of the Reach. Randyll Tarley, stern as granite, marched with 4,000 swordsmen, yet not to conquer. His men carried plowshares among their spears and pitched camps beyond the city walls, trading meat and barley for cobbled stone. Garland Tyrell, his armor chased with vines, drilled the gold road's length, escorting wagons laden with saplings and quarried limestone. Each arrival tightened the velvet garrote about the Lion Queen's throat without drawing blood. But castles do not surrender to gardens alone. For every loaf of bread passed to the small folk, a quieter union formed behind shutters in the houses of great lords. Lady Staunton of Rook's Rest, still mourning her son killed upon the Blackwater at Stannis' hand, pledged coin for the rebuilding of the sept, on the condition that no more wildfire ever flare beneath King's Landing. Lord Buckler of Bronzegate, his fields burned by Lannister foragers, saw in Margaery's mercy a chance to restore his orchards, and swore his garrison to her cause. Even dour Lord Stokeworth recalled the songs of summer courtyards in Old Town, and asked only for peace they might sing again. Within the Red Keep, Cersei sat upon a throne of swords, yet found herself caged by fear. The wildfire she had unleashed to drown her enemies had instead washed the kingdom in suspicion. Qyburn's whisperers brought tales of reachmen giving bread where goldcloaks gave only blows, of sparrows preaching that the gods had spared the true queen. Cersei responded with decrees. The harbor taxed, the gates watched, the faith militant outlawed once more. Each decree cut the city deeper, each cry of outrage sowed fresh fields for Margaery's harvest. One moon past the sept's fall, the hour came for open daylight. At the first toll of the bell of Baelor, half melted yet still clanging, 20,000 small folk spilled onto the Broadway leading to the ashes. They came barefoot, bearing white roses ripped from reachman trellises, and from rooftop gardens, coaxed by Margaery's seed coin. Fisherfolk hefted nets, strung with seashells clattering like wind chimes. Smiths raised hammers that glinted sunrise gold. Innkeepers poured casks of ale into battered cups for strangers. Cersei ordered the gold cloaks to disperse them, but the gold cloaks tasted ale first, then broke bread, and soon their corrugated iron wall softened into a sieve. When the roar of the multitude reached the queen's chambers, she flung her goblet across the map table, spraying arbor red over the painted hills of the Westerlands. They chant her name. She hissed. They forget their true queen. Yet it was not Margaery's name that rolled like thunder beyond the arrow slits. The crowd shouted only one word, peace. And peace wore a Tyrell smile. At midday, Margaery stepped onto the foundations of the ruined sept, her cloak cast aside for a gown, the color of dawn, pale rose edged in new leaf green. Snowy ash still drifted when the wind shifted, but she stood unmasked, head unbowed, and raised no banner save the hush that fell upon the crowd when she lifted her gloved hand. "My friends," she began, the words carried by sept voices no longer alive to speak them. "I too have lost kin and faith. The mother calls us to grieve, but not to linger in grief. The father calls us to justice, but not to bleed vengeance. The warrior calls us to courage, but not to fury. On this ground, all the gods have wept enough green tears." Then she spoke of gardens that would rise from the ashes, of trade crossing the Mander to the Blackwater unharried by tolls, of grain stores kept beneath every great sept so famine would never again haunt the crown lands. She asked no fealty to herself, but pledged fealty to the realm, to every farmer's child who scraped winter's crust from an empty pot, to every wife who waited for sons lost on foreign fields, to every bastard who dreamed of honest craft beyond swords or thievery. Her vision shimmered like sunrise on ripening wheat, and the crowd answered with a hush so profound even the Red Keep might have trembled. When she finished, a single flower fell at her feet, then another, until the stones were strewn with petals where wildfire had once blazed. She did not stoop to gather them. She turned her steps toward the Red Keep's distant towers, her silent retinue parting the sea of small folk. They parted because they knew she walked, not to conquer, but to invite. Within Maegor's holdfast, Cersei watched Margaery's ascent through a narrowed spy-hole. The sight of roses scattered across the hill moved something deeper than fear inside her. A flash of an older wound, perhaps, when she had walked this path to marry Robert under banners just as bright. Yet that memory only sharpened her wrath. She called Sir Gregor, but the mountain's vacant eyes stared past her as though deaf to command, and she remembered too late that Qyburn's leash rested not in her hand, but in the dead man's monstrous will alone. The hand she truly needed was elsewhere. Jaime rode the riverland still. With no lions left in the capital, save young Tommen laid to rest by her own miscalculations, she faced the encroaching petals alone. Pride twisted into dread. For all her armor of arrogance, she recognized the numbers. Rosy banners on every wall, city gates manned by soldiers who would not lift spear against those who fed their children, small folk chanting peace instead of riot. A kingdom that refused to fight for its queen had pronounced a softer, surer verdict than any sword point. Yet surrender, for Cersei, meant more than the loss of a crown. It meant relinquishing the right to shape the world in the image of her vengeance. Even so, vengeance could scorch only what lay within its reach, and the reach now belonged to another. When the first cry at the gates announced the Lady of Highgarden's arrival, Cersei's breath caught. She understood in that thudding silence that her story had reached its final act, and no blade awaited. Only choice. She chose defiance because she knew no other creed. When the queen's door swung wide, admitting Margaery with but 2 sworn shields, Cersei stood robed in black, the spiked crown heavy upon her golden hair. Her smile cut sharper than daggers. "You come to kneel," she said, "or to die." But Margaery did neither. She moved past the Lion Queen to the window and peered at the city, humming with her promise. "I come," she said softly, "to write an end to bleeding." "Peace is a pretty word," Cersei spat. "Yet you forget whose sigil adorns the great hall." Margaery turned, eyes as green as any wildfire spark. "A true queen reigns for her people, not despite them. They no longer want your crown. They have no say." "They do," Margaery replied, "when all the swords they feed and clothe stand behind them instead of before them." A silence stretched, so taut it might have snapped into violence. Instead, it bent around grief. For the first time, Cersei saw in her rival not a doe-eyed girl consigned to chambers and chaste smiles, but a woman forged in the furnace she herself had kindled. And Margaery saw not a monster, but a mother who had buried 3 children in 3 years, whose love had warped into terror of the void that lost Carve. "Step down," Margaery whispered. "Live long enough to be remembered by the living, not the dead. Let the realm heal around you instead of over your bones." The words brushed something raw inside Cersei, and for one heartbeat, she imagined Lannister crimson billowing beside Tyrell gold, the Sept's bells ringing once more, the laughter of small folk, safe from fire. Yet that promise was not hers to wear. It belonged to the woman who stood before her like dawn in winter. Cersei's crown scraped stone as she removed it. Slow, reluctant, but final. No blade compelled her, no chain bound her wrists. Yet when the gilded points touched her upturned palms, they cut deeper than dragon steel. She held the crown out, but Margaery did not reach for it. "The realm does not need another queen upon iron," Margaery said. "It needs a gardener. Keep your crown until a council of lords and commons can choose whether crowns shall rule at all. For now, let us be stewards together." Thou. Stewardship, not supremacy. The notion struck like cold water. Cersei frowned. "You would share rule with me after all I have done." "I would share burden," Margaery answered. "The mother teaches that even the wicked may find the path of mercy. The warrior teaches that courage speaks softest when it defends the fallen. And the crone teaches that wisdom is born of failure." The crown trembled. Steel and guilt weighed alike. Cersei's arms sagged. In that drooping gesture, Margaery discerned the first fissure in the Lion Queen's armor. Instead of prying, she stepped beside Cersei, laid one gentle hand atop hers, and together they set the crown upon the map table, among spilled wine turning the painted seas dark red. Outside, the bells of King's Landing chimed again, not knelled for death but ringing with the bright fragile echo of possibility. 2 queens emerged onto the terrace, one draped in black, the other in rose and green. The crowd stirred like wheat before a summer storm, awaiting thunder. Instead they felt only a warm wind that carried a new pact. Margaery spoke first. No blood will stain these stones today. We rebuild, not as Lannister or Tyrell, but as Westerosi. She offered her hand to Cersei, palm up, empty of swords. Cersei hesitated, and in her hesitation the long shadow of her grief passed slowly over her eyes. She saw Tommen's small fingers slipping from a windowsill, Joffrey's purpled face contorted in death, Myrcella's smile cold in a wooden coffin. She saw Wildfire's green flame reflected in her own gaze. If she accepted, she surrendered her last certainty. That fear alone preserved her children. But her children were already gone. Only fear remained, and fear offered no lullabies, no airs, no dawn. Before the multitude, the Lion Queen placed her hand in the rose's outstretched palm. A hush so profound it stamped even the bells fell upon the city. Then from somewhere deep in the press of humanity rose a single cheer, timid but irrepressible. Another joined, swelling like a river in spring flood, until 1,000 throats roared where once the sept had stood. Margaery felt the surge pass through her like sunlight, yet she released Cersei's hand after a single heartbeat. The future would demand more than a gesture. It would demand laws written, granaries filled, galleys launched, debts repaid. And it would demand forgiving what Wildfire could never cleanse. When the roar subsided, she raised her voice one last time. By the will of the gods and the hearts of men, let this be the day the wars of 5 kings end, the day the crown bows to the realm. The wind carried petals across the terrace. They caught in Cersei's loosened hair, brushed her cheeks like children's hands returned in phantom farewell. Tears glimmered where Wildfire once blazed. She did not wipe them away. So began the reign of the Gardener Queen and the Lioness Regent. A peace not born of victory or surrender, but of a single choice given room to bloom. The red keep stones, long stained with blood, drank new rain that spring and sprouted moss between their cracks. In hidden gardens, saplings climbed towards sun, roots curling through skull-strewn soil to reach untainted earth. And though storm clouds lingered upon distant horizons, the city learned to breathe again, each exhale scattering the ashes of its morning across waters already teeming with the first green shoots of tomorrow. A gay, ham, wow. One. Wind carried the salty breath of the Blackwater across the terrace, where 2 queens had clasped hands. But dawn's first promise soon ceded to the merciless labor of day. Margaery felt the weight of it before the petals had even settled. Peace was a living creature, born fragile and urgent, demanding milk and midwives, and a hearth kept bright. If they failed to feed it, the child would starve by winter. So, at first light, she convened a council in the ruined small hall, its scorched rafters creaking like old bones. No banners draped the walls. Instead, she set a single table of raw pine, scented of sap and spring. Around it gathered lords who had never before shared more than sword blades. Randyll Tarly in iron gray, Lady Staunton in widow's weeds, Lord Giles Rosby coughing sickly into a kerchief, and even Maester Pycelle's shy successor, an earnest, stooped youth fresh from Old Town who blushed at every raised voice. Cersei arrived last, flanked by Sir Gregor and Qyburn, yet for all that ominous guard she sat in silence, pale cheeks hollowed by sleepless nights. Margaery spoke not of crowns. She spoke of roofs. Thousands are homeless, she said, her voice low but carrying. We must rebuild before summer storms drown the streets in filth and plague. Tarly grumbled about coin, Rosby about timber tariffs, but Lady Staunton laid a calm hand on the table. If we tax grain coming down the Roserwad by no more than a 15th, Reach harvests will feed building crews, and the levy will fill the crown's purse within half a year. Cersei raised a brow. Taxing your own people first? Convenient. Staunton met her stare unflinching. They will pay gladly to prevent another wildfire holocaust. Silence hummed, broken only by Qyburn's quill scratching. Then Margaery turned to Tarly. You bring 4,000 men. Lend 2,000 to dig foundations, and the city will double your levy with pardons of feudal debts owed by Crownland's villages. They prosper, and you prosper with them. Then Norwan? Soft work softens warriors, Tarly answered. But she saw calculation behind his stern eyes, and when Maester Uther coughed forth statistics, how grain rotted in wagons delayed by bandits because roads lay in ruin, Tarly folded his arms and nodded once. Very well, 2,000 picks and shovels until first frost. Thus were the bones of a new covenant set. A labor levy in exchange for debt forgiveness, a modest tax to raise roofs, and a promise that no house would bear the burden alone. Cersei spoke little, yet each agreement chipped at the Iron Throne's old prerogative. She watched the barter of authority as though her skin itself were being peeled. But Margaery glimpsed another emotion beneath, the weary relief of a woman unburdened of decisions that had always come laced with blood. After the council, Margaery found her alone in Maegor's holdfast, the mountain dismissed for once, golden hair unbound. Cersei stood before the weeping lion of an ancient tapestry, fingertips brushing its frayed mane. I am not made for half measures, she said without turning. You asked me to rule and not rule, to yield yet remain. Margaery approached until their reflections merged in the mirrored steel of a decorative shield. I ask you to serve the realm by guarding what I cannot, its memory of war. They must see the lioness tamed by her own will, not the rose's thorns. Cersei's laugh was a cracked shell. You need my sins. I need your story, Margaery replied. Told by you, not whispered by enemies. Confess the wildfire as grief's madness. Let the small folk witness contrition, and they will find space to forgive, perhaps not today, but in time. Only then can peace endure. Tyrell. Cersei's knuckles whitened on the tapestry's fringe. My father taught me never to bend the knee. He also taught you that Lannisters pay debts, pay this one, to all of them. She left Cersei in silence. Hours later, bells called the city to the dragon pit, where scaffolds rose for a vast shelter. Cersei stepped atop the wooden dais, robes black but throat bare of jewels. She spoke not of queenship, but of motherhood, of children lost to war, of desperate acts twisted by grief. When she named wildfire a curse she had loosed, tears streaked ash upon her cheeks. She bowed her sovereign head to the crowd's roar. Scorn from some, soft weeping from others, and when she rose again, she looked lighter, as though a hidden chain had slipped from her neck. From that day, the work began in earnest. Margaery walked muddy streets, ankle-deep in straw and plaster dust, praising masons with a smile here, a cool jug of reach cider there. She slept little, ate less, letters and ledgers crowding her solar until dawn. Yet for each hour poured out, the city returned 100-fold. Where charred beams once lay, new cobbled lanes sprouted hawkers' stalls. Flooded cellars became granaries. Iron-banded casks of river sand became mortar for temples trending skyward. Margaery insisted on marble steps broad enough for beggars to sit and wash their feet at running fountains. The city had bled. Now it must bathe. Far less tidy were the gamesmen beyond the walls. Euron Greyjoy prowled the narrow sea with black-sailed leviathans, raiding lightly manned manor ships and choking trade. In the south, Dorne watched with cautious eyes, Oberyn's widow Illyria dispatching spies north, disguised as merchants. Most perilous was the muttering in the Westerlands. Lord Kevin slain, Lannister coffers drained by war, gold mines tapped to dust, and no easy faith in a lion queen who stood shoulder to shoulder with the Tyrell girl they once called usurper. Margaery understood that bread alone could not quiet such roars. She needed legitimacy ironclad, forged in the one furnace every great lord still heated, a great council. Not in King's Landing, but in the field of fire's plain outside Bitterbridge, neutral ground between Reach and Crownlands, and but a day's ride from the King's Road fork to the west. The summons carried twin seals, the crowned lion and the blooming rose. Lords blinked at that odd alliance yet dared ignore neither. They came in wagons rattling with plate and silks, banners snapping. Stark direwolf, Arryn falcon, Greyjoy kraken drawn in black oil. Even Dorne sent a sandship of camels led by the youngest sand snake, Elia, her smile sharp as poisoned steel. Tents bloomed across the plain like colored mushrooms after rain. In the largest pavilion Margaery placed 7 chairs of equal height, around a circular table, carved with an ancient weirwood spiral. No seat towered, no seat lowered. When the lords gathered, they found not a stage but a circle that demanded they show faces to every rival. Cersei entered first, armored shoulders squared yet crown absent. Lords whispered, wondering if this was surrender, but she met their eyes with the cool pride of a Lannister who had walked through fire and lived. Then Margaery arrived in dawn-pink silk cut, as plainly as a septa's habit, hair woven with simple myrtle leaves. She bore no circlet either. In her hands she carried a vellum scroll wound in gold thread. "What stands before you?" She began when all had settled, "is not a claim of conquest. It is a covenant of stewardship. This scroll outlines chartered rights for small folk, guidelines for levies, limits upon royal decree without council consent, and the re-establishment of the faith militant under conditions that prevent tyranny by sword or scepter." Lord Royce snorted. "Bold to think parchment binds swords." "Bold indeed," she answered, "but bolder to believe bloodshed binds hearts. We tried that for 20 years. Where has it brought us but ashes?" It was not speeches that swayed them, however. It was coin. Solid golden stags minted with new dyes bearing neither lion nor rose, but the smith's hammer and quill crossing in peace. Tariffs on rich grain promised to refill crown coffers swiftly. Dornish wine shipments regained safe passage through the Stormlands by courtesy of a contingent of Tarly foot, who had evicted the last bastards of the Rainwood brigands. Iron from the Vale's rich mines would flow south at favorable rates to King's Landing for rebuilding. Yet 2 voices held out. Lord Randall Tarly and Lady Olenna's cousin, Lord Mace Tyrell, recalled from Bravos with tales of selling the Reach saffron at double price. Tarly distrusted any charter limiting his right to call bannermen. Mace mistrusted any council that placed roses and lions on level ground with lesser sigils. They formed an unlikely bloc, belligerent father and buffoonish lord, but their refusal threatened unanimity. Margaery sought them that night in a small pavilion lit by lanterns scented with lemon verbena. She served wine herself, dismissing attendants. Tarly stood like a rampart, while Mace prattled about Braavosi courtesans. When he paused to sip, she spoke. "Lord Randall, your daughter Tala writes me often. She says the libraries at Horn Hill overflow. She longs to found a school for girls. The charter includes a royal grant for just such a foundation." Tarly's thick brow rose. "Books will not win wars." "No," Margaery said, "but they may prevent them." She turned then to Mace. "My lord father, 700 Reachmen still languish in debtors' prisons here in the Crown Lands from unpaid tariffs imposed by Cersei's hand. Sign the charter, and they go free to till fields in Highgarden's outer marches. Your grain yields will swell by 1/10. Mace's mouth opened, closed, and opened again. "A 10th, you say?" She nodded. "We have the figures from the Pyromancers Guild. They kept precise property tallies for their wildfire caches. If that was a lie, none could dispute it. The guild's ledgers had mostly gone up in green flames." Tarly grunted once, low as a boar's snort, and extended a calloused hand. Mace, half drunk, signed with a flourish. At dawn the charter stood unanimous. They named their new compact the Concord of Bitterbridge. The Iron Throne itself would remain, symbolic iron welded to dragonfire legend. But sovereign power now lay in the Council of 7 Petals, 1 for each region, seats rotated annually by lot among major houses. The crown retained 2 stamens, Keeper of Coin and Keeper of Laws, chosen by council vote and limited to 6-year terms. The faith gained guardianship of education and infirmaries, bound by oath to never again field an army save at council decree. And at its heart, a steward of the realm oversaw the Concord's tenets, first appointed by acclaim, and thereafter elected every 5 years by Lord and Commoner representation. They offered the inaugural stewardship to Margaery. She accepted, but only upon condition that the second stamen of coin fall to Gendry Baratheon, legitimized for services at Blackwater, and chosen to represent small folk interests. Shock rippled, crowning a former smith with power over royal mints. Yet, none could deny the symbolism. A king's bastard raised by a new order promised that even bastardy might forge iron into honor. Cersei claimed no office. Instead, she asked leave to oversee reconstruction of the sept she had destroyed, answering ultimately to the Crone's penitent order, a new body of silent sisters who bore neither arms nor tongues. They vowed speechlessness until the last burned stone was replaced. Margaery granted it. Some called it punishment, others absolution. Cersei accepted both. Meanwhile, storms gathered at sea. Euron's longships blockaded the mouth of the Blackwater, seizing wheat and wine, tossing casks of arbor gold into the tide just to watch swan-carved prows splinter under ram spikes. The Concord lacked a navy. Stannis' victory and defeat had left wrecks rotting beneath the bay. Lord Paxter Redwine's fleet still licked wounds from earlier wars and sailed months away. And though the North under Lady Sansa Stark sent cordial ravens, her ships were fewer than a kraken's claws. Margaery could not buy peace with bread upon the waves. She required alliances broader than Westeros. She thought of Old Town's whisper of dragons across the sea, of a silver-haired queen who once torched slaver fleets. Rumor placed Daenerys Targaryen somewhere upon the Dothraki Sea, her unsullied regrouping after a ghastly plague. If dragons soared again, they might defend King's Landing as in Aegon's day, or burn it anew. Margaery weighed the chance, pen poised above parchment, that would invite a Targaryen to these shores for the first time in a century and a half. Yet, she did not write. Instead, she called for Gendry. The former smith found her at dusk atop the Red Keep's highest parapet. Below, torchlight spiderwebbed new streets, while the Tower of the Hand remained dark, slated for demolition into rubble for harbor breakwaters. Margaery listened to Gendry's unsure steps approaching. "You look troubled, milady," he said, forgetting to call her steward. He was 2 weeks into office and still wore humility like a too-tight helm. "I hold a realm stitched with threads fine as spider silk," she answered. "One wrong wind it frays. Dragons could be wind or flame." Gendry leaned elbows on the stone crenellation. "Steel's stronger than silk. Steel fosters knives in the dark." "Then forge lighter chains," he said. "Kites, not anchors. Let each lord fly free on the breeze, but bind them by shared string." She considered the image, bright cloth soaring, tethered by common rope. Maybe the realm needed dragons not of fire but of canvas. "You think banners can outmatch kraken sails?" "Banners and oars," he said, grinning. "Stormlanders still build fine cogs, lighter, quicker than Euron's heavy reavers." He proposed a fleet of shallow-draft river galleys crewed by small folk paid fair coin, carpenters from Massey's Hook already pleaded for work. If they could outmaneuver Ironborn inshore, they could safeguard grain convoys. Margaery clasped his forearm. "Then hammer me a navy, Lord Baratheon. But hammer it from hearts, not just iron. Impress no one. Let them volunteer, and give them a share in every cargo they save." Mendemsro. Word spread like a spark on dry wheat. The steward would pay sailors 1/10 of every shipment protected. Fisherfolk who had lost nets to krakens lined harbor quays to enlist. Young women alongside men, eyes bright with the promise of coin and purpose. They named themselves the Rosewater Fleet, smaller vessels painted pale green and trimmed gilt to catch dusklight like petals on waves. While Gendry oversaw keels, Margaery faced internal thorns. Lord Baelish's old network, orphaned after his death, had fragmented into barons of corruption clogging ports and brothels with petty taxes. She made an ally of rival crime matron Lara Seashell, offering legit guild charters in exchange for flushing counterfeiters and slavers. In turn, Lara surrendered her own daughter as hostage squire to Sir Brynden Hightower, a sign that even shadows could bloom under sun. Jealous lords muttered of soft tyranny, yet the city thrived. Wheat flowed, marble gleamed. Orphan boys learned their letters alongside cobbler girls in hornbooks printed with Lannister coin. Cersei's quiet gesture, each page footed by golden lion paws and a rose stem entwined. She spent dawns kneeling among silent sisters, mortar caked on once ivory hands. Many dismissed her piety as performance, but those who labored beside her sensed something stripped raw, a woman wordlessly atoning in shards of broken stone. Even Jaime, when he finally rode into the capital with dirt-grimed riders and banners drooping, stilled at the sight, his sister atop shifting wood platforms hoisting beams with calloused fingers. His single hand flexed on the reins. He dismounted and climbed the scaffold. For a long moment they said nothing, just the dust of memory between them. Then Cersei touched his stump with gentle fingers. "I no longer need your sword," she whispered. "I need your hammer." He did not understand, but he stayed. They labored together under sept bells half restored, and each night Jaime dined not in royal halls, but at long trestles where masons swapped jests with silent sisters writing jokes in chalk. He discovered laughter loosened burdens far better than wine. The Great Council reconvened by autumn to ratify new harbor laws, but its work was interrupted by riders bearing blood-soaked Kraken banners. Euron Greyjoy had captured Arbor grain ships bound for Dorne, flaying captains and sending their skins nailed to driftwood rafts up the Mander as mocking gifts, demanding the steward bend knee and grant him dominion of the Shield Isles. Lords clamored for war. Cersei herself snarled that no Kraken would throttle her city's throat while she still breathed. Yet Margaery refused immediate battle. "The Rosewater fleet is untested," she argued. "If we sail now, we risk sailors' lives on unseasoned decks." Lord Tarly slammed fist upon the table. "Every day we delay, my granary's empty." Margaery proposed an alternative stroke. She quietly dispatched Sir Brynden Hightower with 2 fast cogs disguised as merchants. Their holds carried not grain but barrels of wildfire salvaged from blackened catacombs, diluted and stabilized by pyromancers desperate for amnesty. Under moonless dark, Brynden slipped into Ironman's Bay and scuttled his own ships at the mouth of Pike's inner harbor, igniting green flame that sealed the channel in molten nightmare. Euron's reavers, celebrating loot, woke to a tide on fire and cliffs raining slag. Lost were 20 longships. More importantly, the Kraken's mystique was wounded. He sailed south to seek retribution, but his fleet limped, and the Concord's newly finished shore batteries atop Kingsguard Tower unmasked rows of scorpions that speared 3 outriders within arrow's reach. Euron withdrew, howling curses. Prey harried by fisherfolk skiffs, whose captains pocketed bounty gold for each harpoon lodged in Kraken hulls. The victory welded commoners to council more deeply than any decree. Songwrites spun ballads of the Fire Rose Gambit. Children played at steering green-tipped barrels into puddles, then lighting them with sun-baked lenses. Some maesters fretted Wildfire's resurrection, but Margaery stored remaining jars in a sealed vault beneath the sept. Keys held jointly by herself, Cersei, and the High Septon elected by popular vote. An unprecedented threefold lock, none could open alone. Winter threatened early. Ravens from the north warned of heavy snows even this far south. House Stark requested grain relief for White Harbor, whose stores had burned in a warehouse blaze. Council coffers thinned from rebuilding. Randyll Tarly resisted shipping bread from a harvest, only just filling granaries. Margaery faced a hard choice: tax again and risk revolt, or refuse and watch half the realm freeze. She turned to Cersei. "The Lannister vaults under Casterly Rock." "Empty," Cersei said. "The mines yield less gold than tales claim. What remains? Jewels? Plate? Stories?" Cersei replied bitterly. But Jaime, leaning upon her chair, cleared his throat. There is still Lannisport's western lighthouse, lined with lantern mirrors hammered from Myrish silver. Melt those mirrors, and you have coin. Them? No. Cersei's eyes slid to her brother. Lighthouse silver guided ships for centuries. Tearing it down equaled sacrilege. Yet she gave a single nod. Melt it. Let the North's hearths be our beacon instead. So silver mirrors found new life as stamped stags, and a train of wagons creaked up the King's Road loaded with Reach barley and Casterly coin. Sansa Stark received them at Moat Cailin, sending back a carved wolf and rose banner that soon flew over the Concord's chamber. Two houses that once warred now stitched into Hope's tapestry. Not all threads held. In the alleys of King's Landing, zealots of the old faith militant, angered by wildfire's unatoned sacrilege, formed the Green Acolytes, hooded youths who painted sigils of flame upon tavern doors run by those allied with the New Order. One cold night they cornered Cersei, returning from the worksite, and slashed her forearm with a rusted blade dipped in sewer filth. Jaime cut down too, but the rest fled. He carried his sister to the Red Keep, while silent sisters bound the wound. Fever set in. For 3 days Cersei drifted between worlds, murmuring to ghosts. Tommen Myrcella Joffrey-daughter. Margaery kept vigil, kneeling by the bed's foot while Qyburn mixed leech poultices. On the 4th dawn the fever broke. Cersei woke to find Margaery's hand wrapped around hers. "You stayed," she croaked. "I said we would rebuild together." Cersei turned, tears gathering. "I tried to kill you once." "You tried to survive," Margaery answered. "Now live." When she rose to address the council again a fortnight later, her voice carried a rasp, but her words rang iron. "The Concord promises mercy. I will not be cause for its failure." She laid her own house as Valyrian's steel sword, Bright Roar's twin, once lost, now found in a Volantine vault purchased back at ruinous cost, across the table. "Place this in the armory of the Rosewater fleet. Let it defend those I once endangered." Shock stilled the room. A queen surrendering her ancestral blade for common defense? Tarly murmured a prayer. Gendry bowed, and the High Septon crossed himself thrice. From that gesture spun new edicts. An oath of mutual defense among all houses. Penalty of exile for lords who raised private armies without Concord sanction, and an annual tourney whose purse came not from taxes but from voluntary contributions by guilds flush with trade. Years might pass before such seeds bore fruit, yet each day's labor watered them. Children born beneath those scaffolds knew only stories of war, not sights. Their games featured hammer, quill, and rose more often than sword. Scarred men and women still woke screaming, yet they found solace in midday chimes that echoed over bustling markets instead of cannonades. One evening, as first snows dusted the rooftops, Margaery climbed the Tower of the Hand's ruin, now cleared to reveal a flat plateau turned into a hanging garden. Snowflakes melted on lavender and night-blooming jasmine coaxed from Reach seedlings under glass. Cersei waited beside a stone bench carved into lion paws. "The Sept's roof stands," she said, staring at distant white scaffolds. "They'll place the mother's new statue tomorrow." Margaery inhaled sandalwood from braziers banked against the cold. "Walk with me when they unveil it." The lioness studied her. "Will they not jeer?" "Some," Margaery admitted. "But they will cheer louder when they see you place the wreath at her feet." Cersei fingered the fresh scar along her arm, purple and puckered. "Every night I dream of green fire. Every night I dream of roses wilting," Margaery said. "Yet each dawn we wake and step forward." They stood in silence as the first star brightened above the bay. Far below, the Rosewater fleet's lanterns winked like scattered petals upon dark water. Bells tolled 8th hour. Somewhere children laughed around a snow-sculpted dragon breathing harmless frost. Between two women who had once clawed for the same crown lay a garden soft with snow and promise. Peace, like the delicate jasmine, would require tending through tempests and drought alike. But its roots were deep now, in the common folk who owned shares in merchant galleys, in silent sisters who chose bricks over blades, in lords who found profit not in wars, but in roads and schools, and in two queens who, by stepping back from blood, had given the realm room to breathe. As the star's light spread, Margaery touched Cersei's hand once more. This time, not as a bargain, but as quiet recognition. Snowflakes settled on their joined fingers, melted into warmth, then froze again in glittering crust that caught the starfire and scattered it like tiny shards of wildfire, harmless at last, transformed into something that could illuminate rather than destroy. In that fragile gleam the future unfolded, uncertain yet steadfast, promising that should winter bite hard, the realm would answer not with swords and flames, but with hammers, quills, and the enduring bloom of a single rose rooted deep in the ashes of yesterday. A-K-N-D-E. Silver twilight bled over King's Landing as the mother's statue ascended. Her alabaster gaze turned upon streets where chimneys breathed wood smoke instead of wildfire. At the Septi's unveiling, Margaery stood with Cersei before throngs bundled against early frost, their silence thick with expectation. When the last rope was cut and the statue settled into place, winter's hush shattered into cheers that rolled up to the Red Keep and out across the river like drumbeats on still water. Though her cheeks burned crimson in the cold, Margaery's mind spun ahead. Peace felt solid today, but it rested on shifting layers, like fresh ice atop the black water, gleaming yet perilously thin. She had hammered politics and charity into a fragile sheet, but underneath churned currents, iron-born fury, Dornish pride, and rumors born on frosted winds of a dragon queen steering west. If even one cracked through, the whole sheet could shatter. That night, in the quiet of her solar parchment maps blanketed the table, outlines of Westeros, the summer sea, and Essos's jagged coast. She traced a finger from Meereen to Dorne, where a dotted line of quills marked rumored movements of Daenerys Targaryen's remaining fleet. 3 dragons once lit the sky above Slaver's Bay. Now ravens reported 2, perhaps only 1. But 1 was enough to burn her hard-won gardens to ash. She summoned her spymaster, none other than Elia Sand. No longer a dagger-witted girl, Elia had proven adept at the Concord's newborn web of whispers. She arrived wrapped in a red shawl embroidered with suns and spears, eyes sharp as winter constellations. "I have word from the Stepstones," she said before the door closed. Qohor's black ship sails south, carrying Sellswords bound for Volantis. The Sellswords speak of a queen with silver hair seeking allies before she crosses the narrow sea. 2 dragons they claim, 1 wounded, wings patched with chainmail netting. Chainmail on a dragon? Margaery blinked. "A crude attempt to guard torn membranes," Elia replied. "But it flies." Margaery exhaled. "Send envoys, quiet ones. Offer passage through the Stepstones for any Volantine convoy that claims the Concord's banner. If Daenerys means to barter for ships there, she will hear of our courtesy." Elias' brow arched. "We bargain before we meet." "We garden," Margaery corrected. "We sow seeds where soil looks barren. If she sails west, she must pass our islands. Better we line them with lanterns and open gates than with scorpions." When the sand snake departed, Margaery sank onto a cushioned bench. Cold seeped through window panes, but fatigue gnawed deeper. For weeks she had juggled ships and statutes, famine relief, and the fevered politics of lords unaccustomed to commoner councils. She longed for the sweet stink of Highgarden's orchards, for the hum of bees in lavender bloom. Yet even there, duty's vines would coil. Peace demanded constant pruning. A soft knock broke her thoughts. Gendry entered, hair dusted with sawdust, cheeks raw from dockside winds. He carried a narrow wooden box. "Finished," he said, setting it before her. Inside lay a ship no longer than her forearm, carved from cedar, sails of fine linen painted pale rose. Tiny oars lined the hull. Its prow bore a stag leaping through a halo of petals. "A model for the Rosewater fleet," he said. "Built to scale. Lighter ribs, reinforced keel. She'll dance circles round any longship." Margaery traced the polished hull. Smile warming. "You name her. It's custom for the patron." She closed the lid, meeting his earnest gaze. "Then I name her Dawn's Grace. May she herald mornings without war." Gendry flushed, then glanced aside, suddenly shy. "There's more." We'll have 20 such hulls by spring. But we need pitch, and the Crownlands forests are stripped. Benderu. Blackwater Rush carries pine north. She mused. But White Harbor controls the best tar kilns. We must barter with the north. She hesitated. Will you ride with me? A steward's word weighs, but a shipwright's plan convinces. The notion of leaving the capital tightened her chest, yet she sensed opportunity. A northern journey could cement ties, show small folk their leaders traversed icy roads to hear them, not just to hunt alliances. And perhaps, far from marble corridors, she could breathe. 2 days later, the council convened in the echoing chapter house of the faith. Stone walls hung with garlands to honor the new statue. Margaery announced her intent. She would travel north with a small retinue, Gendry, Sir Brynden, Elia, seeking tar, grain contracts, and to witness winter's bite firsthand. In her absence, the Concord throne would rotate to Lord Royce, seasoned in Vale law, while Jaime and Tarly oversaw the city guard. Cersei listened, fingers. And winter winds had chapped her lips. A scarf hid the scar. When Margaery finished, Cersei spoke quietly. If northerners greet you with stony silence, send a raven. I will ride myself to plead your case. Those words, once unthinkable, drew a ripple of surprise even from Tarly. Margaery met Cersei's eyes, amber once bright with scorn, now clouded yet steadier. Thank you, she said simply. The journey north began beneath gray skies. The King's Road, freshly repaired, was lined with waymarkers carved in twin sigils. Small folk gathered to wave, babies wrapped in rose-patterned swaddles, old men lifting tankards. Somewhere near Hayford, a girl tossed a garland onto Margaery's palfrey. Its scent carried the promise of summers yet to come. By night, they camped beside inns where merchants traded news. Ironborn raids waned after Brynden's fiery strike. Dorne sent sandship caravans heavy with citrus. In Old Town, archmasters debated whether books should record the Concord as monarchy or republic. Margaery listened, gauging pulsebeats of a realm slowly redefining itself. When they crossed the Trident, snow fell in earnest, blanketing plains beneath a moon cold and sharp as whetted steel. Gendry rode close, cloak flapping like a ship's banner. Under starlight, they spoke of hull shapes and ballast, of scholarships for orphan apprentices, of whether one could shoe a horse with flexible bronze to grip icy stones. Their laughter rose pluming into night, fragile but real. At Moat Cailin, Lady Sansa received them with measured warmth. The northern court, though slimmed by lean harvest, offered bread and salt and mead that steamed in chill air. Sansa led Margaery to a watchtower where torches cast long shadows over desolate swamps. The tar kilns of White Harbor, Sansa said, burn day and night, but winter slows carts. We can spare pitch if you help us open a southern canal when snow thaws. A 2-week cut through the Wolfswood would have travel. Canals need stone masons, Margaery replied. We send them once roads clear. She paused, eyeing Sansa's russet hair braided with white ribbons. And scholars, northern children deserve libraries too. Sansa's lips quirked. Perhaps a theater as well. Even wolves enjoy tales when nights grow long. They clasped hands, not just a bargain, but kinship. As they spoke, Gendry and Lord Davos Seaworth pored over harbor charts, while Elia traded Dornish dates for fermented fish eggs with northern stewards, laughter rising like sparks. That night Margaery dreamt of a single silk thread stretching from the Reach to Winterfell, down to Dorne, across to the Iron Isles, lattice knitting the realm. Yet ice wind rattled the dream, whispering of something vast winged above cloud, dragon's shadow or storm's omen. She could not tell. On their return south, couriers met them with urgent ravens. One carried a seal broken from seawater, Daenerys Targaryen herself. The parchment ink bled but legible. I come not for crowns already claimed by mercy. I come to heal what dragons once burned. Grant me audience at storm's end on the first full moon of spring. Together, we may shape a realm where dragons guard gardens, not scorch them. Margaery's pulse quickened. The prophecy of her sleepless nights drew real. She drafted reply by campfire. Storm's End doors will stand open. The Concord desires only petals, not ashes. Let our voices prove stronger than flame. Yet all diplomacy required spectacle. She planned a summit. The Steward, the Lion Regent, the Dragon Queen, symbols that could resonate louder than horns of war. And where better than Storm's End, seat once besieged by dragons yet never taken. Winter's tail snapped on their heels. By the time the party rode into King's Landing, icicles hung like crystal daggers from eaves. The city, though bustling, wore frost silver. Children skated in shallow frozen pools near the dragon pit scaffolds. Bakers sold rose-shaped sweet rolls steaming in coal. In the council chamber, Margaery relayed the invitation. Lord Royce grumbled of old Valyrian tyranny. Sir Tarly clenched jaw at talk of foreign queens. But Jaime spoke first. Storm's End has thick walls and deeper honor. Let the dragon come. We've little to fear from talk. Cersei's gaze flickered. She still remembered Eris, remembered the taste of smoke on nights when Robert dreamed of rebellion. Yet she lifted her chin. If we deny parley, we confirm our weakness. Let her speak. Preparations consumed the city. Masons redirected efforts from the Septi to repair Storm's End's ancient gatehouse. Tailors fashioned new banners, rose, lion, and a blank third awaiting whichever sigil Daenerys would choose. Three-headed dragon or something reborn. Scribes copied the Concord Charter onto vellum trimmed with black velvet, ready for presentation. Through it all, rumors churned. Some small folk feared dragons would devour cattle. Others pinned hope on fiery wings deterring Ironborn. Septons preached caution, while merchants stacked cellars with salted meats for potential siege. The full moon of spring brightened an unseasonably calm sky. Margaery, Cersei, and a retinue rode south beneath stars that glittered like fresh-cut glass. Gendry traveled ahead to inspect harbor defenses. Jaime commanded the road escort. Elia scouted coastline vantage points, eyes sharp for Kraken sails. They reached Storm's End 4 days before the appointed date. The castle's massive drum towers rose from cliffs like fists of rugged stone. Inside the yard, Baratheon men drilled with spear and shield, their new stag and rose badges catching dawn. Margaery walked parapets with Lord Edric Storm, Robert's last acknowledged bastion of that name. Fatherless yet standing, Edric spoke of gales severe enough to peel roof tiles like scales, of lightning storms that split the sea horizon with eldritch fire. Dragons won't breach these walls, he said with boyish pride. I hope dragons will never need try, Margaery answered. The appointed night fell still, windless. Torches blazed along battlements, their flames steady in tranquil air. Then, distant, at first, a rhythm like thunder rolled across the Black Sea. Not sky thunder, wing thunder. Gray clouds parted to reveal an enormous dark shape riding the moon's pale wreath. Gasps echoed. Archers wavered. Margaery raised a hand, calm and firm. No arrows loosed. The dragon descended with surprising grace, a vast bioluminescent shadow landing beyond the outer curtain upon the narrow beach. It was smaller than tales painted, perhaps half Drogon's size, but its scales shimmered indigo and copper in torchlight. A harness of leather and chainmail braced its wings, patched where membrane showed burn scars. Upon its neck sat a woman robed in midnight blue, silver hair braided into loops pinned with lapis. Daenerys dismounted lightly, as though stepping from a bard's stage. Sand crunched beneath bare feet. Dark eyes appraised walls, torches, silent soldiers. When she reached the gatehouse arch, she found Margaery waiting alone, cloak undone to the cold. Welcome to Storm's End, Margaery said. No horns, no throne, Daenerys observed. Voice low, slightly hoarse. A queen meets me barefoot in spring frost. Why? Because crowns weigh less than peace tonight, Margaery answered. And winter's bite feels sharper than iron. Daenerys studied her a moment, then smiled faintly. I once burned slavers' chains. Now I mend chains for a dragon wing. Life is strange. Margaery guided her through torchlit tunnels into the round hall. There, Cersei and Jaime waited beside the Concord table, its spiral grain polished. Cersei rose, not in black, but in simple gray velvet. Jaime bowed, his golden hand removed, a plain leather cap covering the stump as sign of humility. No retinue. Only 4 figures and echoes. The hush seemed to hold centuries. Daenerys touched the table's weirwood spiral. This wood, once rooted deeper than kings. You carved it down, yet still it lives. May it bind us, Cersei said. Daenerys' gaze darted to the Lion Queen. Recognition flickered. The woman who burned her father. The Dragon Queen's jaw tightened, but she laid a palm flat against the grain. Tell me your covenant, and why I should respect it. Margaery unrolled the charter. She spoke not of thrones, but of schools and tar canals, of a navy funded by share profits, of a silent sisterhood who rebuilt what they once condemned. She described small folk owning stakes in ships, orphans apprenticed in prince hops, the mother's statue carved by penitent hands. Daenerys listened, eyes narrowing. When silence fell, she asked one question. And slavery? Outlawed, Margaery said without pause. Penalties enforceable by council and faith alike. Lifelong indenture becomes paid labor with path to land allotment. Daenerys exhaled. Her shoulders lowered a fraction. You build a realm I once dreamed to rule with fire. Perhaps fire is no longer needed. But diplomacy seldom bows to pure goodwill. She requested harbor rights for her fleet. Safe stables for dragons during molt. A voice on the council of 7 petals equal to any region. Jaime bristled, but Margaery countered. 1 dragon equals 1 region's swords. Offer a rotating seat. Dragons need not anchor in politics forever. They debated till candles dripped dawn-pink wax. At last agreement. Daenerys would hold an observer seat for 2 years. In return, she would patrol seas against Ironborn, escort grain convoys, and refrain from claiming King's Landing walls without council invitation. Her dragons would aid in controlled burn fields to rejuvenate soil by Pyrrhic fallow, supervised by maesters. When pens scratched signatures, rose, lion, dragon, thunder cracked outside. Actual thunder. Storm's End's legendary gale broke silence, slamming shutters, rattling doors. Lightning bathed hall with white flares. 3 women faced each other in sudden brilliance. Rose gown, gray velvet, midnight blue, figures cut of myth. In the next flash, they extended hands. 3-pointed star. A pact sealed not in blood, but in the echo of storms. Morning unveiled devastation beyond imagination, though not wrought by storm. A raven arrived from King's Landing at sunrise, feathers caked in soot. Its message bore Royce's seal, trembled by a scribe's terror. Wildfire vault breached. Green inferno beneath the river. Flames licking the piers. Anchor, chains melting. Suspect sabotage by green acolytes, avenging lion penitents. Council chambers evacuated. Rosewater fleet still in harbor. We need dragons or the city burns again. Margaery's knees weakened. All her toil, her vows, fragile as ice indeed. She turned to Daenerys, voice a whisper. Help us. Daenerys' answer came in the roar of her dragon as they sprinted toward the courtyard. The indigo beast launched skyward, spray of sand and snow swirling. Jaime barked orders for horses. Cersei stood frozen, horror reopening old scars. But Margaery seized her arm. Come, ride with me. The city must see us both return. They galloped north as storm clouds shredded. Above, the dragon streaked, wings beating sunrise gold. By midday, they reached the Blackwater's bend where smoke shrouded the horizon. Green tongues licked water. On the river, wooden hulls bobbed ablaze. Grain ships, fisher craft, even 2 rosewater galleys. Crowds clustered on quays, screams tearing air. Daenerys' dove. Dragonfire from Indigo Maw met wildfire on river, and shockingly, quenched it. Blue flames smothered green, starving it of alchemical impetus. The dragon skimmed water, wings throwing spray that hissed against coals. Margaery watched from city gate, heart hammering. Inside walls, chaos reigned. Acolytes in emerald masks hurled torches, chanting vengeance for the gods. Gendry and Edric Storm led truncheon-armed dockworkers in desperate charges, breaking cells of arsonists. Yet each green spark threatened the city's heart. Cersei dismounted at the square before the Septi, eyes blazing. She climbed ruined steps left from the first destruction, steps she herself had scorched years past. Raising arms, she shouted, "Enough!" Her voice cracked like whips. Silence rippled outward. Flames sputtered unseen but heard. "I lit wildfire once," she yelled, "and lost everything I loved. Do you avenge the gods by repeating my sin? Or do you sentence yourselves to the same torment?" "Oh." Mask-clad zealots hesitated, torches wavering. Then one dropped his brand with a hiss. Another ripped off mask, tears streaking soot. The mob fractured as quickly as it formed, dissolving into sobbing penitents. Gold cloaks doused sparks. Bucket lines formed. Bells tolled warning but not dirge. By sundown, smoke thinned. Daenerys' dragon perched upon a broken crane, exhausted but triumphant. The black water ceased glowing green. Charred hulls drifted. Salvageable. Casualties were mercifully few. Fear had spread faster than flame, but a queen's roar and a lioness' confession had beaten back inferno. That night, the council reconvened in a charred granary, the only hall intact. Wet soot-stained robes, dragon-scale steam still rising from courtyard puddles. Margaery addressed them, voice hoarse. 3 queens saved this city today. One with dragon's breath, one with steadfast hands, one with a simple word. Peace remains fragile. Wildfire still lies buried. Yet together, we quenched a blaze once thought unstoppable. Then Tyrell. She announced new edicts. All remaining wildfire casks would be loaded by night onto an uncrewed barge and towed far offshore. Daenerys' dragon would ignite it in open sea at dawn, a pyre for old sins. The faith affirmed, the pyromancers bowed, Cersei signed first. At first light, a flotilla escorted the barge beyond sight of land. Margaery, Cersei, and Daenerys watched from the battlements. When the dragon loosed fire, the horizon erupted in green sunrise, a pillar of emerald crowned by white. The boom reached their chests like a final heartbeat of the old order. Then, silence and sea. Wind carried salt and the faintest scent of roses from gardens reborn. Cersei sagged against rampart, tears free. Daenerys laid a gentle hand upon her shoulder. Margaery breathed deep, tasting brine and hope. Across Westeros, ravens carried news. Dragonfire had destroyed wildfire, Lioness had quelled zealotry, and the Rose herself remained unburnt. In taverns from White Harbor to Sunspear, they toasted the threefold dawn. Bards wove songs of indigo wings across the green sea, of the lion's confession, of the rose that would not wilt. Children born that year would never remember the old tyrannies, only tales. And for the first time in living memory, the realm's songs were not lamentations, but lullabies. Peace remained a delicate bloom, ever in need of tending. But now its gardeners were 3 queens whose hands bore scars of fire and frost alike, proof that even in a land forged by conquest, mercy could take root and blossom into glory beyond crowns or swords. Ah, pa. Wah. The chill of dawn that followed the green-tinted pyre forced even the hardiest sparrows from the streets. Yet King's Landing had never felt more alive. An ache lingered in every foundation stone, but the ache was of knitting bone, not festering wound. Margaery stood at her favorite height, halfway up the scaffold that ringed the half-rebuilt dragon pit, listening to hammers ring like distant bells. The day after the wildfire's funeral, laborers had returned without orders, as though the realm itself understood momentum must never slacken. Above them all, Daenerys' indigo dragon dozed on a buttress, backlit by dawn fire, the breath from its flared nostrils smoking in the morning air. For King's Landing, dragons were no longer a tale told at dagger point. They were a promise that yesterday's horrors need never repeat. Peace, Margaery had learned, possessed a cadence of its own, a steady pulse beneath the cacophony of politics. She felt it in the even march of the day's first wheelbarrow, in the crack of permafrost chipped away so new flagstones might settle, even in the lilting banter of children who now gathered to watch masons instead of executions. Yet she also sensed the tremor of new tests gathering on the horizon, as inevitable as weather. War might be starved for now, but war's appetite was bottomless, and the skin of their newborn world was still far too thin. She called council mid-morning in a restored septarium, whose walls still smelled of lime wash. Winter sunlight scattered through clerestory glass, unscarred by any mortal hand. The 7 chairs around the spiral table were occupied quickly. Cersei in quiet gray, lion's mane bound, Daenerys draped in midnight wool, Gendry wearing a half-smile beneath pitch-stained hair, Sir Randall Tarly polished like a mailed fist, Elias Sand lounging with desert ease, Lord Roy stone-faced, and Sansa Stark traveling by raven through the voice of Maester Uther, who read her letters in soft northern Kate. Margaery opened with the question that woke her every night: how to transpose yesterday's miracle into tomorrow's habit. "We saved a city," she began. "We must now save a generation, or they will find new wildfire in old cellars." Cersei's fingers grazed the recent scar on her arm. The green acolytes were not born of poverty alone. They were fed by grievance and orphaned belief. Daenerys nodded. "In Slaver's Bay I learned the price of toppling a faith. You cannot break chains only to let minds remain in bondage to old fury." Her gaze flicked to the dragon beyond the open arch. "Let me carry messages, not flame. I will fly with healers to every torched village from the war, to every sept whose bells have rusted silent. Show them a dragon delivering salves and grain, not death." Tarly shifted. "Impressive token, but the reach still bleeds coffers dry shipping barley north. Our larders shrink faster than frost can cure." Before Margaery could answer, Gendry cleared his throat. "Tall talk from a man whose wagons roll brightest. Your house prints the hand seal on every sack." A dangerous glimmer entered Tarly's eye, but Margaery lifted a hand. "House Tarly deserves recompense, but the realm deserves memory of generosity. We propose a reach credit, grain now for promissory notes underwritten by the Concord's treasury bonds. When trade surpluses bloom in 3 harvests, you reclaim your bounty with interest." Royce grunted approval. Seconds later echoed by Uther on behalf of the North. Tarly, no stranger to stone math, scrutinized the parchment. "If the treasury defaults, then my personal dowry covers the shortfall," Margaery said. "My grandmother taught me to prune roses with silver as well as shears." Silence sealed the deal. With that, the council turned to tides. Elia produced a map daubed with fresh ink. Ironborn longships sighted at Fair Isle, cohort Selsward Carracks massing at the Lye Straits, and a curious cluster of black-sailed galleys haunting the summer sea like vultures, without banner or whisper of allegiance. Daenerys laid a slender finger on those black marks. "Not ironborn. Their keels ride deeper. These look volantine." Elia nodded. "My eyes agree. Triarch politics in Volantis have turned turbulent. New war hull experiments they call firefangs. Bow-mounted Myrish fire-throwers. Burn half a port with one volley, if rumors true." "Then, yeah." Cersei paled. "Our river quays are still patching. One such volley and we relive our nightmares." Royce leaned forward. "The Vale's high shores deflect such craft. Invite them to Gulltown, and rock and tide will grind their glory." "Tide flows both ways, my lord," Margaery murmured. She touched the map's edge. "We need early warning. Signal towers across the coast, fires lit by mirrored lighthouses, Jaime's mirrored silver save northern hearths. We should forge more." Tarly huffed. "More mirrors, more men to man them, more coin." Margaery held his gaze. "Consider it an investment cheaper than rebuilding the capital a 3rd time." Argument dissolved into measured assent. The council dissolved hours later, but Margaery lingered, coiling plans like vines: signal towers, grain credits, dragonborn healers, bond markets. So many strands that one tug in the wrong season could unravel all. Night found her on the terrace outside her solar, frost-etching balustrades. She thought she was alone till Daenerys appeared, breath pluming white. The silver-haired queen, once fire-walking conqueror, now moved with careful calm, as though every step upon Westerosi stone felt borrowed. "I remember standing on Meereen's pyramid," Daenerys said, not looking over, imagining I could shape the world merely by wanting it so. Yet every city I freed threatened to devour itself the moment my eyes turned away. Margaery's laugh steamed. "Gardening teaches humility quicker than dragons. A single beetle can undo weeks of cultivation." "Your concord is braver than my conquest," Daenerys murmured. "Braver, because it trusts people, not fear." Margaery studied her companion's profile. Cheekbones sculpted by exile, eyes shadowed by losses she could only guess at. "And yet, conquest gave you wings above wildfire yesterday. We combine our strengths, or we fail." A soft rumble answered, the indigo dragon curling around the tower below, protective as a cat. "He grows restless," Daenerys said. "Sky is his gift, walls his cage." "Then fly beyond them," Margaery urged. "Take word of peace to the lords who doubt. Show them fire turned shepherd instead of wolf." Daenerys smiled. "Come with me." Margaery's heart flinched. "I have charts to balance." "Charts will keep 2 days. Let the realm see Steward and Dragon Queen shoulder to shoulder above the clouds." Dawn broke as they soared beyond the city, icy wind knifing through Margaery's cloak, yet filling her with giddy awe. Below, the King's Road unwound like silver twine. The black water's morning mist parted for their passage. They skirted the stormlands, banking near castles still pocked by siege scars. At every village, farmers halted, plow and child alike pointed skyward, faces shining not with terror but wonder. The message carried on wings louder than any herald. Dragons did not come to scorch fields, but to guard them. They landed at Evenfall Hall, seat of House Tarth, where Brienne herself strode across the frost-whitened courtyard, half laughing, half gasping to see Margaery dismount behind a queen of legend. Brienne knelt. Daenerys bid her rise. They spoke of island watchtowers, of training girl squires to stand alongside boys. Margaery pledged parchment grants. Daenerys offered the dragon's sentinel flight over shipping lanes. The journey continued west to Fair Isle, then riverside to Seaguard, where Lord Mallister still counted the graves of men lost to Ironborn reavings. At each stop, Daenerys knelt beside widows. Margaery clasped craftsmen's calloused hands. They shared bread, listened more than they spoke, left behind only a circle of minded promise. The tour, 2 days stretched to 5, ended above snow-wreathed Moat Cailin, where Sansa and Arya greeted them. Arya grinning at the dragon, like a girl glimpsing a sword for the first time. There, in a drafty hall, heavy with pine scent, 7 women dined alone. Margaery, Daenerys, Sansa, Arya, Brienne, Elia, and Lyanna Mormont, summoned by Raven for the occasion. No men oversaw the table, no brothers, fathers. Only voices that once had been muffled by war's tumult. They spoke of canals and grain and broken chains, but also of memory, of songs sung to lullabies instead of marching drums, of the taste of honey after a season's first apple. That night, Margaery lay in a northern guest chamber, sleep eluding her as snow whispered across shutters. A thought, small but insistent, took root. The realm had always trusted crowns forged by steel and prophecy. Yet, here were rulers stitched from unlikely cloth. Bastard's hammer, widow's lioness, exiled dragon, a wolf with quill, and the world had not ended. Perhaps prophecy itself bowed to compassion. Perhaps this, not some maester's tally of heritage, was the song of ice and fire come true, not in the swords of great men, but in the quiet resolve of women who refused to repeat their fathers' sins. Morning ravens shattered reverie with new tidings. Word from the east. The Firefang flotilla had crossed the summer sea and landed at Tarth's southern coves, setting torches to fisher huts before local guards could rally. Their purpose unclear. They hoisted no sigils, only black pennants stitched with a single crimson serpent. Margaery gathered the others in the great hall. Brienne's jaw tightened. My father's folk have nowhere to flee. The coves are hemmed by cliffs. Daenerys' dragon shifted outside, sensing her mounting rage. "We fly," she declared. Margaery set a hand on her forearm. "Not alone. The Rosewater fleet lies nearest at Storm's End. Gendry can sail at once. But we must know the Serpent's game. Elia." The Sand Snake unfurled a scroll pocketed at Moat Caelin's war room. "Crimson Serpent. It is the sigil of the Sorrows Guild, a Volantine slave consortium forced underground after Daenerys' purge. They fled Essos to rebuild trade, black sails to cloak chains." Daenerys' fury flared, but Margaery seized the strategic moment. Their brand is chains. Their weakness is hearts aboard those ships. Slaves pressed to oars. Win the slaves, you drown the masters. Bendamando. Arya leaned against a beam, gray eyes glittering. "I can slip inside their ranks. Free the Orlocks when battle begins." "Too great a risk," Sansa protested. Though her voice held no disbelief, she had seen her sister walk knife-edge risks before. Margaery turned to Brienne. "Sail with Gendry. Your honor vouches for his steel. Daenerys and I take sky. Elia coordinates coastal signals. Sansa, send ravens to the Reach and Lion's Bay. Any lord who will lend scorpions or ballista." She scanned their faces, feeling the old heat of command ignite inside her. "We may water our gardens with peace, but we must fence them when wolves roam." The plan unfolded faster than frost on glass. By the time Margaery and Daenerys swept into Storm's End 3 days later, the Rosewater fleet's 20 green-trimmed galleys rocked under sun-swollen canvas. Dawn's Grace led, prow gleaming. Gendry saluted from the quarterdeck. Brienne stood armored in blue and gold, her sword Oathkeeper mirroring sunlight. Overhead the Indigo Dragon wheeled, bearing Daenerys and Margaery in tandem harness, fabricated overnight by dockside saddlers delirious with awe. Wind salted their hair as the fleet cut south toward Tarth's burning coves. Smoke smeared the sky long before cliffs reared. Black galleys clustered like carrion, torching huts, rounding prisoners in chains. On the largest deck, a high-born overseer cracked a barbed whip, mouth carved in triumphant sneer. Dragon's shadow eclipsed him. Panic rippled. But Margaery squeezed Daenerys' arm. "No fire." They circled, banking low so oarsmen could see 2 women astride scales that glowed like twilight pearls. Margaery's voice, amplified by a copper horn strapped to harness, rang over crashing surf. "Oarsmen of the Serpent, the Concord of Westeros names you free. Strike your chains and the Rosewater fleet will ferry you to lands that pay wage, not debt." The whip cracked again, but an oarsman, ribs welted and eyes burning, swung his manacle against the nearest master's knee. Bones crunched. Chaos erupted. Chains became clubs. Iron collars became grapples. Brienne's voice bellowed from the fleet's lead ship. "Boarders, with me." Gendry's galleys closed in a crescent. Grappling hooks bit gunwales. Ladders slammed. Brienne vaulted first, Oathkeeper humming bright arcs that dropped slavers like felled reeds. Behind her surged dockworkers, wielding truncheons, smiths swinging hammers, men and women who had built keels and now defended their promise. From above, Daenerys resisted the primal urge to loose fire. Instead, she guided the dragon in tight orbits, its roar alone enough to drown shouts. Yet slavers manned one of the Mirish fire throwers, a wicked bronze nozzle belching orange. A gout of burning jelly arced skyward toward the dragon's belly. Daenerys banked, but flame licked a wingtip. Scales blackened, the beast shrieked. Instinct crashed past restraint. A jet of blue-white dragonfire stabbed downward, striking the fire thrower head-on. It erupted, iron jacket peeling like fruit. Shockwaves shattered the master's quarterdeck, yet no wildfire chain ignited. Small mercy. Margaery clung to the harness, heart thrumming. When they caught level again, she surveyed the galleys. Slaves in open revolt, Rosewater Marines storming across rails, black pennants tumbling into sea. Victory brewed but threatened to tip into massacre if fury ran unbridled. She gestured to Daenerys, then loosened her harness strap. On the next pass above the flagship, Margaery leapt, falling through smoke to slam against creaking planks. Pain flared, yet she found her feet beside Brienne's towering form. "Spare the crew who drop weapons," she shouted. "We rule by mercy, not fear." Brienne echoed words till they rang from prow to stern. Something fragile but potent passed along blood-spattered decks. Slavers on knees spared by their own surrender. Slaves spared the guilt of butchery. Chains clanged as locks cracked. Freeborn cheers thundered skyward. The sea battle lasted hours. By sunset, every serpent pennant burned on the waves. The Rosewater fleet towed freed ships in triumph. Daenerys' dragon, wing bandaged by makeshift sailcloth, glided onto Tarth's shore. Brienne knelt among her own people, tears streaking soot as fisher children clung to her calves. Margaery issued sealed writs to every freed galley. Sail north to Gulltown and beyond. Find wage in Concord harbors. Deliver timber south for signal towers. They would be paid in silver stamped with Smith and Rose. Under starlight, the victors feasted on spit-roasted grouper. Gendry knelt beside Margaery, offering a mug of spiced rum. "You jumped from a dragon," he said, voice thick with chastisement, laced with wonder. "It seemed shorter in the moment," she replied, smiling through bruised ribs. His fingers brushed a stray lock from her brow. "You rule hearts, reckless as storms." She looked into eyes that still saw the girl from Highgarden behind the steward's mantle. For the first time since Wildfire's echo, she allowed herself to lean, to draw warmth not merely from duty but from human closeness. "Storms break," she whispered, "when shelter is shared." Their lips met, gentle, tasting salt and ash and possibility. Overhead, Daenerys watched from Dragon's Perch. Smile wry, perhaps wistful, yet accepting. She had once loved a warrior prince beside a sea of grass. She recognized a dawn cresting for others. Days later, they returned to King's Landing with captured galleys in tow. Decks crowded by former slaves, singing in 14 tongues. The sight of black ships turned emissaries of peace stirred the city beyond song. On the quay, Cersei awaited, flanked by silent sisters with baskets of bread. She placed the first loaf into the hands of a freed child, whose wrists still bore welted rings. When the girl met her amber stare, Cersei knelt, not queen to subject, but penitent to future. In the Red Keep's forecourt, the council reconvened, this time with chairs for the freedmen's chosen speaker, an erstwhile translator from Lys named Saburo, alongside the master's envoys who survived. Justice was swift yet tempered. Overseers who wielded whips faced gaol and reparations. Lesser deckhands conscripted by debt were offered clemency and employment on fortification crews. Ships confiscated into public fleet, their holds filled with reach timber for signal towers. The council also ratified the Tarth Accords. Any vessel entering Westerosi waters bearing chains or slave cargo would be seized. Crew offered trial or amnesty for cooperation. Freed souls paid wage to sail the confiscated ships under Rosewater banners. Profits split between sailors and the Concord treasury, a fiscal armistice between conscience and cost. Winter slowly relinquished its grip. Signal towers rose like gleaming needles from Cape Wrath to the Fingers, each capped with mirrors hammered from salvaged lighthouse silver. When first spring sunrise struck their facets, beams skipped across seascape in a dazzle, concentric rings proclaiming watchfulness. Peace felt sturdier now, layered. Dragons in sky, fleet on sea, towers on shore, laws in parchment, bonds in hearts. Yet Margaery knew, a gardener always knows, that rot returns if vigilance wanes. She still walked muddy alleys disguised in gray cloak, listening to gossip, measuring pulsebeats. She found fewer groans of hunger now, more chatter of wages, festivals, newborn hope. But she kept her ledger of complaints, each leaf a weed ready for removal. In quiet hours she drafted a grander dream. Houses of healing in every region, pairing northern herbal craft with Dornish sun gardens. a citadel satellite in Highgarden devoted to civil engineering, so no lord need beg Essos for bridges, an archive, beside the rebuilt sept to hold testimonies, written, sung, painted, of the war's horrors, so memory itself became. Cersei approached her one dusk holding a half-finished sculptor's sketch. The lioness regent proposed a monument not to herself, but to the children lost across 2 decades of conflict. Stone figures ringed around a fountain where lilies and roses would float. Water, she believed, could echo tears yet promise renewal. Margaery embraced her, feeling armor of mutual past finally soften into sisterhood. Daenerys took to patrolling far horizons. Rumors spread of her second dragon healing in a hidden vale, perhaps ready to join the skies soon. She returned between journeys to consult on trade routes, to tell wide-eyed orphans tales of unsullied warriors planting olive groves in Astapor. In her wake, she left scrolls, charters exchanging Valyrian steel knowledge for Westerosi timber, joint academies where maesters might study dragon physiology alongside wildfire chemistry, under strict oaths never again to mix flame and malice. One late summer evening, the 3 queens stood upon the highest terrace of Maegor's Holdfast. Sunset bled vermilion over rooftops, gilding signal mirrors until they flashed like scattered gems. Below, the black water glimmered free of green taint, fleets rocking tranquil. Laughter drifted from markets where new stalls sold Dornish spices beside northern furs. Margaery spoke first. "Do you hear it?" Cersei cocked her head. "I hear vendors haggling over cinnamon." "Precisely," Margaery said, smile tender. "Years ago we would have heard moans from plague wagons, bells tolling for debtors, stags roaring at one another across battlements. Now the loudest cry is of coin exchanged for pastry." Daenerys traced a finger along the rampart. "The world I crossed deserts for is here, on this wall, sharing quiet." She turned. Silver hair laced with salt wind. "Will it last?" Margaery took her hand, then offered her other to Cersei, forming again the 3-point star. "If we remain gardeners, vigilant to prune rot and nourish root, I believe so." Cersei's scarred arm flexed, warm inside Margaery's grasp. "Gay. Then let us dig," she said. "The realm will always need dirty hands." They stood until the final sliver of sun melted. Lanterns flickered to life across the city, mirrors catching their glow, relaying it outward, from mast to tower, tower to hill, hill to vale. A web of light, delicate, yes, but real, spanning all they had saved. Somewhere beyond sight, Ironborn still plotted, Essos still schemed. Winter would return, dragons might sicken, towers might crumble. Yet strength now coiled not merely in stone, but in people's shared stake. Wildfire lay at the ocean's bottom, bones of old kings rested, and the songs that drifted through alleyways were lullabies and work chants, not dirges. In that luminous hush, the 3 queens whispered a vow, each adding her cadence to a covenant that had outgrown parchment. "We guard, we grow, we guide." The wind carried their words over rooftops to mingle with children's dreams. Somewhere a newborn stirred, breathing air free of smoke, while bells no longer told calamity, but chimed the hour for evening supper. And in a garden that had once been rubble, the first moonflowers of summer unfurled, white petals pure against night, their fragrance a promise that even from ashes, the future can bloom if hands steady and hearts stay brave.